Hello everyone, welcome to It's a Sin Unpacked. The new Russell T Davies drama is finally here and we'll be unpacking each episode straight after it airs. So be sure to subscribe and make sure you click the notification bell so you know when we're here. My name is Phil Marriott. If you're new here, welcome to this discussion. If you're watching this live as it premieres, please join everyone in chat to share your views. If you're watching it later, don't forget to leave a comment down below and share your thoughts on the show. Let me introduce my fabulous co-host, who is Sean Vickers. Hey, Sean.
Hi, Phil. Hi, everyone. Oh my gosh.
How excited are we?
I'm very excited. I'm kind of excited about what may be happening down here. So please do make sure you get your views in. Yeah, how brilliant. Oh my gosh, episode 1 is in the can. I'm ready for this, Phil. I'm ready.
Yeah, me too. I know it's quite early on, but I think it was worth the wait, wasn't it? Everybody's been waiting ages for this.
And Channel 4 have really drip fed to us. They've been saying coming soon, I think, for about 5 years. So like now I am definitely ready. I'm gonna have to have a lie down after this for sure.
Overspilling. Now we should say we should give out a warning because we may give spoilers. We're going to try not to give spoilers. Obviously the first episode, well, all of them are available now, but we don't really want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen any of the episodes or all of the episodes yet. So I think we should probably say that first. And also we should give out a trigger warning because the subject matter, I think, could trigger a lot of bad feelings for a lot of people. We had a tweet, I think it was just the other day, from somebody who said that they're going to be watching but their partner isn't because it's going to bring back a lot of horrible memories from when he went through this, because obviously it's, you know, based on true stories. And I think there is a lot of influence on Russell T Davies' part. I think you know, he obviously was of a similar age. I think he was 18 in 1981. So I think a lot of these stories, or a lot of the character studies, are based on his experiences.
Yeah, it's tough. But yeah, you're right, Phil. It's a subject matter which is hard. So we are going to step through this in the most respectful way that we can. Yeah. So yeah, we totally get it.
So where do we start? Perhaps with the characters?
We could start with the characters, but can I just start with a real high note, which is the soundtrack.
Oh my God.
1. Very early doors, we get Enola Gay by OMD.
Yeah.
And literally I was like, okay, this is going to be the soundtrack. Like, you get Enola Gay. I've written this down, guys, because I have got a dreadful memory. Don't come for me.
And then Kelly Marie.
Enola Gay, Kelly Marie. Kelly Marie just keeps coming back for us in this episode. Thank God. My heartbeat, it beats like a drum. Yeah. Tainted Love percolates into this episode. And then there's like a bit of Small Town Boy, but the bonking bit, there's a bonking bit. You've all seen the bonking bit.
Well, there's got to be a bonking bit. I mean, it's Russell T Davies, for goodness sake. We sing Queer as Folk. That was just a bonk fest.
It's a bonk fest. And I was thinking, what will Russell do in this? And that bonk fest, which is to some like weird Charge of the Light Brigade, kind of like a Poppers O'Clock Charge of the Light Brigade.
Do you know what that was? I know, because I remember that single coming out. It was Hooked on Classics. And I love that scene because it's so hilarious. It's so slapstick, isn't it? I mean, it's brilliant to the sound of those electronic hand claps that run all the way through. It's like a classical version of Stars on 45. I mean, it's a real cultural thing in the early 80s.
There
were so many of those singles.
I was like listening, thinking Phil will know what this is.
Oh, I do. Anyway, I was there.
That for me, I was like, okay, the bookends of the soundtrack. Obviously, this is set in 81. So episode 1 is set in begins in 81, September 81. I was like, oh my God, flawless. So yeah, Phil, you're right. Sorry, I just had to get it out of my system. Let's talk characters. I'm brimming over. You're going to have to stop me.
Richie Tozer, you know, he's the character that everybody is looking forward to seeing. His particular story, because obviously he's played by Ollie Alexander from Years and Years. And most bizarrely, a lot of people don't realise that he's an actor, because that's where he started, wasn't it? Before Years and Years.
Exactly, yeah. A lot of people don't know that at all. Yeah, they placed him with Years and Years, but yeah, he's an actor. So
he lives on the Isle of Wight. He has a family, I mean, pretty typical for its era, I think, the early 80s. I mean, I could kind of, it resonated with me, but his hair's quite different. His hair is very different to Ollie in real life, isn't it?
That is very true. I did look, it was quite coiffured. Yeah, you get a sense, so like his parents, Clive and Valerie, like very early on, as it starts, he's talking about women's rights and about how, way back in the 18th century, women didn't have rights and like a husband could go to prison. And in some ways, it's really clever because it starts by positioning the views of Clive and Valerie, because I think Valerie's a little bit like, oh, Clive says, oh, don't give your mother ideas. Yeah. And it very much sets this scene of a very traditional nuclear family in the Isle of Wight, working class, you know, and the shape of it, you know, they're a classic 2.4 family. There's obviously Clive and Valerie, there's Richie and his sister Lucy, who I will come back to because I think she's a bit of a bitch.
She's a bit of a moody one. We've got the mother who's played by Keely Hawes, and the mother is kind of trying to hold the nucleus of the family together. She's very optimistic, very, you know, always cracking jokes and very smiley. But the dad is quite, you know, he's quite a bit of a realist, but also in some ways, you know, he doesn't have a clue what's going on because he really doesn't realize, you know, obviously what his son's about to go through or his son is going through. The mother at the dinner table very early on says, oh, you know, you're packing up to go to uni, go to college to study. And she says, oh, I'm going to go through your cupboards and have a tidy up and clean and chuck everything out. And then he realizes obviously what's stashed in his cupboard.
I know. The stash. I mean, the stash was quite freaky, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah, I thought that scene was lovely about the wardrobe. And I was like, you know, there's just a look of horror because he knows what's in that wardrobe. And let's just set the scene as well here. Like, Richie's off to London. He's going to study law. And then that first end of the segment ends with Richie on the ferry and his father, Clive, comes up with a box of condoms. And it's a bit like, you know, it's a bit wild on the mainland. Take it easy. And then there's a part here which I think is quite important because for Richie, he throws the condoms away. And actually, when you think about what condoms come to stand for in our community through the 80s and 90s and ongoing, it's just this kind of moment of like, I don't need these for what I'm up to kind of thing. And I thought that was really but it's quite powerful.
Absolutely. And it certainly wasn't a throwaway concept. The idea behind it, obviously, like you say, once you think about it, you realize how important that gesture was, but in a different context, obviously, because his father is thinking quite differently. But should we move on to the next character? That's Roscoe.
Oh, let's talk about Roscoe. Roscoe Babatunde. What a ledge.
What an amazing family as well. I mean, you know, there's quite a lot of humor in the first episode. I think it sets up the characters quite nicely in that quite playful way for what's to come, because I think you do need the balance of both humor and the dark tones. But he works on a building site, but his family's great.
His father picks him up from work every day, and clearly there's some history there. And the history is that his family know that he's gay, and they're trying to pray the gay away. And so they really don't want Roscoe to be exposed to anyone. So his father's picking him up, driving him home. And what you realize is that the family have found a copy of Gay News in the household, and there's a lot of drama.
But there's certain members in the family who I think were expecting what happens to happen when he's upstairs and he comes down, and he basically... Well, he owns it, doesn't he? He owns that scene because what he does, without spoiling it for the people that haven't seen it, is hilarious. But there are a couple of, you know, members of the family who just burst out laughing, as I did when I saw it.
Yeah, the aunties really do go for it, and there's a very touching moment because his sibling is worldly wise and clearly sees the writing on the wall for Roscoe, and she's there to help him. I won't say too much more. But Roscoe, what a fab character.
Oh my God.
Say is living their best life.
I don't know about you, but I just love how sassy and how confident he is. And I think, you know, for what's to come, I think in the other episodes, I think he's really going to be the linchpin of the group of these new friends because he seems to be taking care of people already. Yeah.
He's a real character. You know, we all know that. We all know a Richie and we all know a Roscoe on the scene, you know? And then you come to a Colin, and we all know a Colin on the scene.
Oh, yeah. This is the weird thing, because I think deep down you know that he's not as straight as he looks, because he looks like an older man in a younger boy's body, because what he wears kind of older clothes and very, very stuffy clothes. But you just know that there is going to be a peacock waiting to come out. It's like the white swan, isn't it? It's the beautiful swan from The Ugly Duckling.
Totally. Colin is really unassuming. He's very gentle. He comes from Wales.
Yeah.
He has moved to London to start his career on Savile Row, or a Savile Row type location. And he's working at a very kind of dusty and stiff tailor's under the tutelage of the owner, Mr. Hart, and Doogie Howser.
Mr. Hart's such a creepy guy.
Yeah, we'll come with Mr. Hart. He's a very creepy guy. There's a very creepy scene. But yeah, Doogie Howser, Neil Patrick Harris is in there as Harry Coltrane. Harry Coltrane is a smart cookie and clocks Colin pretty early on.
There's a really amazing scene well, it's when they break the ice. Basically, they go to the pub, and it reminded me of when I came out, at the time I came out when I moved to Bromley. I moved to London and I started off in Bromley, and I was working at Our Price, and I had a lesbian boss, and I came out, I shaved my hair off, and then went into work and said, I've done it, I've told people. And she was elated. And it kind of reminds me of that similar setup. Whereas you know that Neil Patrick Harris is going to look after Colin, because obviously he's new to coming out, as I guess they all are, but he seems the most vulnerable, I think.
Yeah, of course. He's probably the most sensitive.
Yeah.
And yeah, I won't go into too much, but there's quite a creepy moment with Mr. Hart, the owner, and he's saved by Harry Coltrane. And there's just a lovely moment where Harry is just being himself, and he is telling Colin about his lover, Juan Pablo from the Algarve, and how they met. You know, they met at Gatwick, and he kind of allows Colin to just, for the first time, it seems, express who he really is. I think that's a really lovely scene. And yeah, it's wonderful. I like the bit where Colin says, he reveals, and Harry says, "Don't worry, your secret's safe with me." And then he says, "Another pint for the bender." Yeah,
that's brilliant. And he gives him a little wink as well. It's almost like, I know what's going on. Don't be scared to, admit anything. It's almost like he's giving him that space. He's giving him that space to just be himself.
Exactly.
It's a really beautiful scene. You're right. I love that scene. It's really touching. But all I've got going through my head now is that clean it again. It's those words, isn't it?
It's really
so revolting.
But each to their own, hun. Love a fetish. And then we start to come into the college scene. So we meet Ash and we meet Jill for the first time, both of who are doing drama, and Richie's kind of slightly in awe of, I think, Ash performing. And then for the first time, you overhear these two girls talking in the background about this cancer that's affected 41 people in New York, and they're all gay. And Richie's so in this whirlwind of lust, looking at Ash, it's kind of happening, but he's just not there. And that is the beginning, the first flavor of what's about to happen. That's
a really good point, because I think it's so subtle you could miss it, because you hear their conversation in the background, but you obviously know that that's a reference to the whole story in full.
Yeah, and there's this signposting, kind of like, it's all fun and games at the moment, but there's something quite serious on the horizon. And yeah, he's in a different world. He's at college. And like, you've got to remember, like, these three people are living their best lives. They're in London. It's the 80s. They're adults. They're experiencing something. They're unbridled, and that's amazing. And it's that, as I said in the promo, there's something interesting about micro and macro, these situations about their lives, and they want to live it. And this awful, epidemic is looming. I think the positioning is really, really important.
Absolutely. Isn't it interesting as well? Because all the press releases have said, it's five youngsters that are moving to London, get to know each other. Originally, I think they titled it The Boys, or it started off as being called Boys, and then he retitled it to The Boys, and then eventually It's a Sin. But I think that's obviously a nod to the female characters in this, because I think Jill, Richie's friend, I think is equally as important, if not more so, particularly in the next episode, which we'll come on to obviously next time. But I think it's a nice reference to the importance of female friends, because I think sometimes, particularly with a lot of gay men, is they're extremely important, because they are very supportive with gay men and what they go through.
Exactly. Well, what we also have to be incredibly mindful of is ongoing and during the AIDS epidemic, at times it was the lesbian members of our community who cared for the gay members of our community. So there is a place in this story, and there needs to be a place in this story for female characters, because it's incredibly important.
Definitely. And you touched on the bonking scenes earlier. What I found quite interesting, particularly with this first episode, as a launch pad really, was was how different the sex was compared to, say, Queer as Folk. Because Queer as Folk, I think it really did take over, and I think it was, you know, I think it was important because of that reason. But I think the sex scenes were perhaps a little bit more graphic than these ones, because these ones, it's almost like they're done in a sometimes, you know, humorous way, like the Hooked on Classics moment, but they're like a reference. They're not what holds it together completely, and I guess that's because maybe Russell T Davies wanted a broader audience.
Yes, possibly. I mean, there was a moment when Hooked on Classics started, and in the back of my head, and I was saying this to my husband, I was saying, oh my God, the sex scenes in Queer as Folk was so legendary and so groundbreaking. What will Russell do here? And actually, it doesn't have to be linear. I think if anything, it was kind of fun. That's what came across. It was just kind of like I'd say, unbridled joy. Like there was a lot of bonking going on.
Yeah, but I guess that's what happens as well, especially when you're about to come out and you meet your friends. You're almost, it's almost like a camaraderie thing, isn't it? It's your people, it's your family. So, you know, it is a joyous occasion. It's really uplifting, especially when you first come out, because it's like a huge weight has been lifted. Yeah. But I mean, there are so many nods to, so many references to the casual racism as well, and some of the racism in this episode certainly, you know, is an important thing too. And I think that's what I love about this, is that it's not just that story alone. It's not just about gay men and the HIV/AIDS epidemic. It's about everything. It's all encompassing, isn't it? It's all part of that period, part of that era.
Well, you get a sense of that. I think Phil and you and I talked about this offline a little bit. You get a sense, certainly when Richie's talking to Ash, because Richie comes across as like, I'm super smart, I was going to do law. But what you realise when he's talking to Ash is that he's actually not very worldly wise. Yeah. He's grown up on the Isle of Wight. He's kind of small town. He's a small town boy. Yeah. And suddenly he's being exposed to different cultures, different people, different places. And what comes across is actually someone who's very naive and actually quite clumsy when it comes to some of these kind of conversations.
And Colin as well, when he says, when he goes to Henry's house and meets his partner, and he says, and it's something that, you know, you just forget about now in 2021. You forget that this did actually happen. He says to Henry, "Do your neighbours know about you two?" And there was a jokey answer saying, "I dress up as a woman when I leave the house," obviously pretending that they're a straight couple. But I found that quite shocking to see that, and then it just brought back the memories that it was actually like that. And, you know, it's still like that, I suppose, on a different scale to some people now, even in 2021. But back in the early 80s, it was just a completely different time, wasn't it?
Well, you have it. I think Russell does a really good really describes this. What I think he does really well is set the landscape really well, because, you know, there's an earlier bit where, and we'll get to this actually, Richie and Jill go back to the Isle of Wight. And it's kind of the first time I watched it, and maybe this is like a gay unconscious bias. My head, I was like, he's going back to come out. He's going back to come out. He's going back to come out. And Jill's giving him all of this support and whatnot. And then as Jill walks in, you know, Clive says, "Oh, where are you from?" And she says, "London." And he goes, "No, but where are you from?" Like, yeah. And it's really kind of like, you know, it's really quite uncomfortable, but it's, you know, and then he goes, "Oh, we're all cool here. We're an all flags household." And it's, I don't know, it's a funny scene because it makes Jill feel uncomfortable, and it is uncomfortable in my mind.
It really is. And it's so accurate as well, because I remember situations just like that when I was that age, and probably after as well. I mean, that whole kind of ridiculous conversation and really, you know, really racist conversation, it still went on for a while after that. And it's only really now that, thank God, that people, you know, have to bite back and say, you know, you can't act like that, you can't behave like that. But thank God it has changed. Which just shows you how there has been a shift in that.
Well, there's another moment later on, and we'll come to it, but, you know, as Harry and Juan Pablo start to get sick, you know, Colin goes around to the house, and the neighbor kind of says, "Oh, you know, Harry's gone to hospital." And then when he asks about Juan Pablo, the neighbor just goes, "Oh, that Archie, he can go home." Like, there's no warmth. It's just pure xenophobia and pure racism. So I think that comes through. And as I say, I think Russell has knitted the landscape well for this kind of narrative. But jumping back into kind of the Isle of Wight moment, you know, actually what he's doing, and actually I watched this the second time. When I watched this the second time, what I realized was it was my own unconscious when I was thinking, my own unconscious bias thinking he's going to go and come out, because actually I don't think at that point Richie's going home to come out. No. It doesn't, But the language that Jill's using, it's very cleverly done. The language that Jill's using, the support, you naturally think that's the situation. And when you watch it the second time, I was thinking, he never was going to come out here. This is all about him telling them that he's going to do drama.
Absolutely, because I think he needs to find himself first. And I think that's obviously what London will prove. I think London will give him that to completely be himself. But I think he needs to go through that before he can be open with his family. Because I think obviously with Jill, he has, because he's got that very close friend. And it's a different kind of relationship, isn't it? I think with your family, even though you are close and you've grown up with your family, I think you still have secrets to a certain extent that you need the time to totally reveal that. And I think that's what that scene proves, I think.
But the father, the father's response is exactly the response. I grew up in Sheffield. It's such a northern response, right?
Oh my God.
When I went to university, it was like, what is the vocation? When you leave university, what is the job you get? So the idea of Richie saying to his father, I'm going to do drama, I was like, I totally buy this moment.
And I love the fact that he goes off to the garden shed as well in a huff, because that's so typical of that attitude with a lot of parents.
We have we start to see Harry at work less. We start to see someone stepping into his place at the tailor's. For Colin, he's concerned. Because he's found a friend, and you start to realize that something is amiss. And there's these scenes are quite difficult. As he starts to visit the hospital, and Colin's actually in complete isolation. No one's allowed in. Colin's in full scrubs, and it's quite a brutal take, because I think what Russell does is kind of take you through highs and lows, but he snaps between them very quickly. So you're having a height of kind of like this unbridled youngsters living their best lives, snap to something which is very real, very honest, and very brutal and harsh about what's happening for someone like Harry, who is just confused. I mean, that whole scene is heartbreaking when he's trying to cling on to something that may have caused, this condition that he can't describe. And he's thinking it's the mold in the kitchen. Yeah. Like, it's just heartbreaking.
It really is. And you're so right, because it has such a dynamic start. And then when you get to that final act, and there are a lot of visual props as well that are used where you don't need to say anything or have anything explained. You see that visual prop outside the door without saying too much on the floor.
Yeah,
the food on the floor, and that is so powerful, because that must have happened to so many people, and that's really shocking. It closes in such a powerful way. Did you notice that the woman that played the kind of Susie Sue looking woman that's rolling her cigarettes in the bar at the pub? Is it the pub or is it in the Pink Palace? I can't remember where she was.
In the Pink Palace. So yeah, so they have a house party. So basically, you get this formation of the gang, which is they've been in the boozer. They're all going back to the Pink Palace. It's where Colin decides that he wants to be in the Pink Palace too. So you're getting the formation of the gang living in the household: Jill, Richie, Roscoe, Ash, and then Colin. And then you get that amazing lady. I forget her name. She was in so many amazing things in the 90s. Was she? Yeah, there was amazing drama I can remember from the 90s.
I was hoping you were going to know who she was, because I did a bit of searching online and I couldn't find her name. But I've seen her in so many things, and she's brilliant, and she's perfect for that role as well. I'm just hoping that she comes into it more.
Yeah, I remember her being in a role when I was a kid, where she worked in a factory. She worked in a factory with a load of other ladies.
Has she been in Mike Leigh movies, maybe? Is it Mike Leigh stuff that she's done?
Possibly. But what's amazing about her character is she's kind of foretelling what she sees, right? And
she's warning, isn't she? Warning.
So she's kind of saying, this is the first time you hear about she talks about GRID for the first time, gay-related immune deficiency, which was a pre-name for HIV before it was defined. And she starts describing San Francisco, starts describing what's happening, starts describing the cover-up. And everyone in the Pink Palace couldn't give two hoots. But I find it so powerful, because for the viewer, I was just transfixed on this lady, because she was kind of describing it. I think it's a little bit like the earlier scene where what you're getting is fact and people are just ignoring it.
Yeah. Because especially with Richie, because Richie is a real disbeliever, isn't he?
In his head, he's logical. So he's thinking, how can this virus, how can this disease just infect gay people? So his brain's going, how does it know? How does it know? How does it know? Because at that point, there's no knowledge about transmission. So in his head, he's like, it's nonsense because that can't happen. It has to infect everyone. You know what I mean? And so he's just being logical. He's misguided. We all know someone like a Richie who's like kind of like big mouth know-it-all. He's a bit like, he trusts his inner voice so much. He's like, this is bullshit. And I think the way that Richie Toes' character is developed by Russell T Davies, I think is super interesting.
I love how there's a real balance as well. We've seen it with previous dramas that Russell T Davies has done. He's obviously done it with Queer as Folk. He did it with Cucumber, where you've got this humor. Sometimes there's not so much humor, but that subtle humor sometimes I think can be quite a scary thing as well. But then it flips. And I think that's a really hard balance to get right, because I think if you do it and it's jarring, it can seem insincere. But I think when he does it, he manages to tap into this reality and to tap into, obviously it's a drama and you've got to dramatize it for entertainment's sake. But so much of this on this first episode, it just brought back so many memories for me coming out. And also, I mean, obviously not so much the HIV/AIDS time of early 80s to mid 80s, but I just remember, the fear of hearing about it on the news. And I think it's that balance. I think that balance you need to get right to believe in it. And I certainly did believe in episode 1. Yeah.
I think,
and the characters that I really like.
Yeah.
That's so important, isn't it?
That just this amazing smorgasbord of characters, which I think is fantastic, and how they're experienced in the 80s. I'd say micro macro. I think it's been written in such a great way, and for some, actually for many, it will educate, because
yeah, you're right, because I think there are still people even now that don't understand completely the dangers, particularly at that time as well, and how scary it was. I think because a lot of people have taken for granted so much in life. I think you need something like this to be done in a dramatic way to educate people, because I think people can be educated more than maybe reading it in reference books or reading the news. I think this is the way to do it with some people. I think they would prefer that way of learning. Agreed.
So let's end on a high note. So surely everyone will now greet themselves going, la.
I'm just going to do that every time I walk into a room.
Is it the new greeting? Will you be on Canal Street saying, la? Will you be going
just
to Welly going, la? Who knows?
Well, I was just going to say that, like, every time we go to the pub, but of course we can't at the moment, but maybe people will be doing it online on Zoom.
Exactly. And I think, I have some big questions. So in my head, what's going to happen next? So let me just tell you about some of the questions that I had after episode 1, which was, 1, has Richie done the right thing switching to acting? Let's see. 2, is Rachel going to be the next big drag legend? Who knows?
La.
Will everyone be saying la every time they go out? Who knows? And how is Colin going to get on living in the Pink Palace?
Ooh, the intrigue. I love it. I can't wait to see what's going to happen next. Of course, it's a week from today. Unless you're watching this on catch up, you're not watching it live at all. But thank you very much for joining us on It's a Sin Unpacked. Myself and Sean will be back. If you want to binge watch our reviews of the other 4 episodes of It's a Sin, click on the Unpacked playlist on the screen right now, and we'll be back at the same time next week for the live premiere, 10 p.m. GMT, obviously UK time, for It's a Sin Unpacked on this YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next week, Sean. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Bye, Phil. Bye, everyone.